President Trump right now, and everything that he's doing is dominating the national discourse. But what can we do to get our communities more engaged in local politics?
Yeah, sure. I think inherent in that question is that Trump coverage is the reason that we aren't involved in local politics. And I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. But I think there are two answers to your question. The first is if you aren't involved, if you aren't on a planning board, zoning board, school board, you should try to run. You should try to get appointed. And the other big one is talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, because when they find out that you've been taking part, you've been giving back to the community, I think they'll want to at least get involved somehow. And they'll have at least questions about how they could also give back.
Awesome. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap our panel now. Time flies when you're having fun. Sorry we didn't get to more questions, but I do want to give Mayor Pete one more chance to kind of address the group and some closing thoughts for us and any words of advice for our candidates.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank the candidates for stepping up. You can see in everybody who came into the panel, you're running for the right reasons. And that's one of the most basic and important things. It shows and it radiates. And I think it is another example of how, with great candidates and good campaigns and organization, and the kind of organization that everyone on this call is generously helping build, we can actually expand the reach of the party more than would have been thought possible. Another thing I wouldn't have thought possible the last time I was campaigning in New Hampshire was that the stakes of this election could possibly get any higher than they already were. And yet here we are, not much more than 6 months later, and they've reached a whole other level. And again, in order to meet that moment, it's not enough to take back the White House. We know we've got to do that, but it's not enough. So much depends on the decisions that are made in chambers like the one where you serve. And so in addition to just personal joy of being reunited with so many friendly faces and folks I got to know in the state and in the legislature who are on right now, I'm also just energized by the importance of this moment. And I'm looking forward to us exchanging hopefully a lot of celebratory calls in November. But we know that between now and then we got to do the work. If the last few months have taught us anything, it's how much can change in the world and therefore in our politics in a matter of months. And let that be motivation for all of us when we get tired or if we ever find ourselves feeling the temptation of getting complacent, that we've got our work cut out for us. But if we do it right, this really is going to be the beginning of a much better period in American history. And it starts right at the level where you're doing the work. So thanks for everything that you do. So thrilled to be with you, and I can't wait till we do have a chance to visit in person. But in the meantime, delighted to be with you virtually, and just sending you all the best from here in South Bend.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mayor Pete. Really appreciate you being with us today, and we'll see you next Thursday night at the convention.
Sounds good. We'll look forward to there.
Okay. Thanks. Speaker Shurtleff, do you want to close us out?
Social Security, universal health care, something like your national service program. What do you think would be the best way to honor him?
What a great question. And thank you for bringing us all the invitation to remember John Lewis. The last day of my campaign was also the last day I saw John Lewis. He had reached out earlier on a trip to Atlanta, and we'd spent some time together. And being with him is like a benediction. And the last day of the campaign, we were part of that march in Selma. All of us rival candidates locked arm in arm, marching. And we didn't know for sure if John Lewis would even participate. He turned up even though he'd already been diagnosed with this terrible illness. And he stood up and he said just that. He called on us to get into good trouble. He said we had to use the vote as a nonviolent means or tool to redeem the soul of the nation. And he kept talking about voting. And I think about that a lot because I think in the end, to get to your question, whenever I get a question of, if you had to pick one thing to work on, if you had a magic wand and there was one policy area you could fix, what would it be? I always come back to the state of our democracy because it's kind of like a way of wishing for more wishes. If we fix that, so many other pieces get better. And that's why we got to work, not just when we take office, but right now to secure the integrity of our elections, to beat back efforts at voter suppression, whether it's suppressing the student vote in New Hampshire, the black vote in the South, the native vote in the Plain States. We're seeing it take different forms in different places, but it's happening all over the place. We got to make sure that it is possible to have elections that everybody has confidence in. And we got to make sure that those elections are safe, that there's a way to vote by mail, and there's a way to safely vote in person as well. We got to defend the postal service. For the president today, I don't know if you saw this, he basically admitted that he was attacking the postal service because he doesn't want everybody to be able to vote. It is that naked at what is being done. And so that's, I think, an area that we really have to be vigilant about, because we get that fabric, that democratic fabric into better shape, just as I believe service is a way to get that social fabric into better shape. I think all of the other issues we care about, healthcare, racial and economic justice, climate action, gun sense safety, all of those things get easier because the truth is an American majority is already there to do these things. We just have to make sure that that majority among the American public is reflected in America's leaders.
Great. Our next question is from Tyler Stitt. Tyler, you're going to get unmuted in a second here.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, Mayor Buttigieg.
Okay.
So yesterday, Donald Bullock, he's a Republican candidate for our Senate seat held by Democratic incumbent Jeanne Shaheen, said in his new TV ad, and I quote, "I didn't spend my life defending this country to let a bunch of liberal socialist pansies wander it away." How do we, as those dedicated to helping Democrats get elected up and down the ticket, respond to this divisive rhetoric in a productive way and not let the heat of the moment consume us?
What a great question. And I'm sorry to hear that kind of rhetoric is currently part of the Senate race there. I mean, it brings to mind for me the idea that I didn't take up arms in defense of this country for partisan lines and almost tribal affiliations. They're actually at a moment where they are ripe to be realigned, maybe more than any time in our lives. And so I think our rhetoric, I mean, don't get me wrong, we should be fierce in defending our values and shouldn't be afraid of it. But I also think there's a way to do it that builds a sense of belonging that lets what I always love to call the future former Republicans around us see themselves at our side, see that they have a place in the story that we are creating about our future. I still think a politics of addition and multiplication beats one of division any day, if not in every single election, then certainly in the arc of the way that an era takes shape. And with so many of our fellow Americans, so many Republicans looking around them and thinking, wait a minute, is this part of what I signed up for? I mean, if you're conservative because you believe in a certain sense of tradition and the way people ought to conduct themselves, and then you see this president. If you're conservative because you're a person of faith and you see this president, if you're conservative because you felt that was a natural kind of link to being involved in the armed services, and you see now what's going on with the politicization of our military, more than at any moment in my life, there's a chance, I think, to call the people on the other side of the aisle and invite them to our side. If we can do it the right way, then we can respond to that kind of rhetoric without ever giving in to the temptation to match it.
Great. So we've got time for one more question, although Pete's not going anywhere. So the question is from David Doherty. David, you're going to get unmuted here.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, Mayor Pete. Thanks for doing it. Thank you for everything you've done for our country. So my question is, if you were in a town hall and had one question you could ask our current president, what would it be?
Wow. I'm not sure I've ever got that question before. I mean, look, I think the question on a lot of our minds when we look at this president is just, Why? Why? You know, why have you allowed it to come to this? Do you not feel some pressure of duty on your shoulders to make this country a better place and to serve everybody, not just some, not just your own base? And at the same time, I know that this president, just for whatever reason, doesn't inhabit the same reality that most of us do. He is in a world where all that matters is his own advancement, and the rest of us can't afford to jump into that world with him. We can't even afford to jump into a world where all that matters is the argument that he created that given day. I think that's one of the toughest disciplines we face, is to always kind of stiff arm and push back on the wrongdoing that's coming out of this White House without allowing him to change the story. You know, right now people are suffering. We're experiencing the worst, by the numbers, the worst economy since 1876. And that's only because they started keeping certain statistics in 1876. Fellow Americans are losing their lives. And this is a moment that calls for boldness and imagination, and above all, calls for inclusion. And we're capable of those things. That's the thing that gets me. This country is capable of these things, even if its president is not. And you know, the good news is the moment of maximum power that people have over their president, which only comes along once, is the moment when they stand for re-election. And if we do this right, we will send a message that not only changes who's occupying the White House, which is so important for so many reasons, but I think it could send out shockwaves strong enough to invite Republicans to ask one another what's become of their party. Because I'd love nothing more than to be debating my Republican friends over whether their plan to make America carbon neutral by 2050 is better than the Democratic one, over whether their approach to empower workers and raise wages is more convincing than ours. To be in a real debate with Republicans over whether their plan for universal health care is better than the Democratic plan. That's the kind of debate I want to be having. And we just might, if we send out a message that riding this kind of tiger is no way to build a lasting majority. And that part, that's up to us right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. It's been a little over 6 months since your last.
We have been forced to right here in 2020.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. We're going to go to Trisha Tidd. Trisha, just wait a second while you get unmuted. But Trisha's got a great question for you.
Hi.
Town hall in New Hampshire, and you picked up right where you left off. Pete's going to stick around, but we're going to transition into our candidate panel. This year, we had an astonishing, I think it's 425, something like that, but well over 400 Democrats filed to run in the New Hampshire House, which broke a record for the number of candidates on the ballot for either party during a single election cycle. More Democrats are running in competitive districts this year for the first time, 391 of 400 seats to be exact. And so much of that is thanks to the hard work of CHED, powered by our hardworking staff team led by Rachel and Julia. The team just doubled in the last couple of weeks, which we're thrilled about, providing some additional layers of support to candidates running across the state. Your donation today to attend this event is helping to support this work. The candidates that we'll be hearing from today are just a small sample of a much larger group of activists and local movers and shakers and community leaders who have all stepped up to serve this year, and they all need our support. So if you don't live in an area where one of the candidates joining us tonight is running, we encourage you to look up the Democratic House candidates who are running to represent you this year, and then get in touch with them to find out how you can support their campaign. But without any further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome today's featured candidates. We're going to take a minute here to unmute our panelists. Let me warn you, like me, some of them are also parents, and there may be some young voices or young faces that join our discussion at some point, but this is, it's very much real life in New Hampshire state politics. It's an all hands on deck situation. And I told our panelists that I'd model an elevator pitch with a focus on brevity, which is not always my strong suit, but here's my introduction. So I'm Matt Wilhelm. I grew up in Nashua, went to college in Plymouth, moved to Manchester 15 years ago this month to serve as an AmeriCorps National Service member in High Need Public Schools, serving as a tutor, mentor, and full-time role model. And then after the 2016 election, out of concern for my 7- and 4-year-olds and their friends' futures, I felt called to step up, serve my community again, this time as a candidate for the New Hampshire House. So I serve on the House Legislative Administration Committee, and I chair the Service Year Workforce Commission, where I have the privilege of working on legislation aimed at removing barriers for young people to serve their communities, our nation, and the world. So I said I'd model it. So I think that was 40 seconds. We've got 6 candidates. We're going to start with my colleague and good friend, Rep. Sue Mullen from Bedford. You're up first.
Well, thanks, Matt. And I appreciate your giving me the leadoff spot after Mayor Pete, which sets the bar a little high. As Matt mentioned, I'm Sue Mullen. I live in Bedford, New Hampshire. I'm a 3rd generation New Hampshire native. And my first call to public service came in the form of 39 years as an educator. So my commitment to public education is strong and true. But I knew that I was going to retire in 2017. And before I did that, I already committed to running for the New Hampshire House, which I did in 2018 with a ton of hard work and a tremendous army of people behind me. We ran a successful campaign and I was elected. I now serve on House Education, and it is my greatest desire, apart from somebody new in the White House, that we hold a supermajority in the New Hampshire House as we move forward into the new term. And I am committing myself to that effort. And as Matt said, anything that anyone can do for a candidate in their town is effort well spent. My little known fact is that I met Mayor Pete, I think, on his first trip to New Hampshire. We were in a little tiny conference room in a bookstore on Elm Street in Manchester, and no one could pronounce his name. It seems like 10 years have come to pass between then and now, but I am ever so grateful to be asked to be part of this panel, and welcome back to the 603, Mayor Pete.
Awesome. Thanks, Sue. Ben, you're next.
All right. Hi, I'm Ben Ming. I'm a lawyer and planning board member here in Hollis, and I'm running for state rep in Hillsborough District 40. My wife's an ER doctor and Notre Dame alum, and we moved to New Hampshire about 5 years ago with our 2 kids. And since moving, we've had a mortgage, so we have a busy and hectic lifestyle. And I felt compelled to run when I saw the federal response to COVID. And I expected a significant impact on the difficulty and the safety of my wife's job. I'm running on a platform of affordability, and I look forward to representing young families because we're making impossible decisions right now, and it's very difficult to explain that to someone that's not living that reality right next to them.
Great. Hi, my name is Carrie Duran and I live in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. I am a single mom of 3 beautiful girls, 2 of which are right in the kitchen right now, trying to be as quiet as possible. I was called to serve really when my daughter Katie was born. She was diagnosed with Down syndrome and she is 9 years old going into the 4th grade. And she is absolutely amazing. And when she was born, because I wanted to make sure she had every possible opportunity, I set forth to learn as much as I could. I joined every committee and board that I could. I started to testify at the state legislature and at the national level and just become involved and advocate for her future. And I'm also in this because I'm a mom and I want to show my 3 girls that anything is possible. I'm really excited to be here, really excited to be running. Thank you.